December 25, 1991, Gorbachev announced his resignation from the presidency of the Soviet Union. On December 26, the Soviet Union officially disintegrated and split into 15 countries. At that time, the Western society had optimistically believed that Western-style liberal democracy had achieved complete victory and that the Western-style democratic model was universal and eternal, and was the happiness and ultimate goal of all mankind, and would surely unify the world. However, the history of world development in the past 30 years clearly shows that human society has not ushered in the so-called end of history, but instead has witnessed the failure of the Western-style democracy system failure, governance failure, and transformation failure. Profound lesson of Soviet democratization. 30 years ago I happened to be studying at Moscow State University. A deep feeling is that Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union at that time, believed in the so-called democratic socialism and advocated democratization at home and new thinking abroad, but he fell into the political trap set by the West and suffered a complete political failure. Therefore, we must bear in mind the profound lessons brought by the democratization of the Soviet Union. In fact, socialism has been strangled by Western capitalism since its birth. 100 years ago, the Bolsheviks led by Lenin won the great victory of the October Revolution. The establishment of the new socialist system not only means the advent of an era in which a just and fair people are the masters of the country, but also stimulates a wave of anti-imperialist and anti-colonial national liberation movements in the world. But the Western capitalist world regards the nascent socialism as a thorn in the eye and a thorn in the flesh. The imperialist politicians vowed from the very beginning that they would do everything possible to strangle in the cradle of this new social system. In 1918, the Soviet socialist regime was subjected to armed intervention by a number of imperialist countries. After the end of World War II, Western powers even regarded the socialist countries represented by the Soviet Union as a threat to the free world. For more than 50 years since then, in addition to maintaining strong military pressure, the Western camp has chosen little strokes fell great oaks and peaceful evolution as methods and means to conduct political and ideological contests with the Soviet Union. Many Western politicians insisted on conducting political, psychological, and cultural warfare against the Soviet Union, using democracy, freedom, and human rights as tools to destroy the Soviet Union's socialist system. During the Cold War, Western countries stole and transformed concepts such as democracy and human rights and used them as an effective leverage and weapon to attack the Soviet political system. The West called the Soviet Union a communist dictatorship and often held up big sticks such as human rights, democracy, and freedom, and launched violent political and diplomatic offensives against the Soviet Union. After the 1970s, the U.S. government took advantage of the high-level meeting between the Soviet Union and the United States to put human rights, democracy, and freedom on the agenda of diplomatic talks, exerting strong pressure on the Soviet leaders. After the signing of the Helsinki Agreement in 1975, Western countries successively established various forms of democratic foundations, and cooperated with foreign affairs, intelligence, and other departments to find political agents within the Soviet East camp to support dissidents or ethnic divisions within the Soviet Union. Political scientist Larry Diamond, one of the two editors-in-chief of the Journal of Democracy, a publication under the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, in the United States, has made no secret that the United States and Western countries are in the Soviet Union and other socialist countries. To promote human rights and democratization is to change the political system of these countries. Regarding the Western political traps and discourse traps such as democracy, freedom, and human rights, Lenin clearly saw the fire and broke it down in one sentence. Lenin pointed out that democracy, freedom, and equality are always concrete and historical. Lenin believed that we should not talk about democracy in the abstract, do not believe in the lies of universal democracy or absolute democracy, and that there is no universal, national, universal, and superclass democracy. Democracy trap laid by the West. As we review history today and sum up the gains and losses, Falling into trap of democratization laid out by the West was the cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the ruling party of Soviet Union. After Stalin died in 1953, the successor Soviet political leaders gradually lost their political beliefs. Their ideals and beliefs began to become shaky, and they finally fell into traps such as freedom and democracy set by Western countries. In 1985, Gorbachev became General Secretary of the CPSU Central Committee. Under the influence of the trend of democratic socialism, the top leadership of the CPSU, represented by Gorbachev, changed its political direction. At the end of the Soviet Union, the CPSU launched slogans such as democratization, openness, and more democracy, more socialism. As Gorbachev confessed, in 1988 we realized that the system itself had to be fundamentally reformed. This led to a comprehensive second stage of reform, which should be based on other ideological viewpoints, based on the social democracy. Under the banner of openness, democratization, and new diplomatic thinking, Gorbachev took drastic and fundamental changes to the Soviet political system, expecting that through democratization and new thinking in diplomacy, to make compromises and concessions to the West, gain the recognition of the West, and enter the Western civilized world. Abroad, Gorbachev's democratization policy was touted by the Western media. Western dignitaries have also awarded various medals to Gorbachev many times to show their praise. Gorbachev won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990. However, contrary to the applause and cheers of Gorbachev from abroad, the democratization reform of the Soviet Union not only failed to revitalize the CPSU and revive the Soviet Union, but instead led to the loss of legitimacy of the CPSU, leading to political division and state disintegration. The key to political reform is the correct direction. The reforms in the later period of the CPSU turned into abandoning the belief, abandoning the road, and abandoning the system. Reform becomes a change of direction, a change of flag and banner, reform becomes digging one's own grave, and finally self-destruction. Political mistakes often have subversive consequences. Gorbachev's democratization transformation instantly turned the CPSU like a lost, mud-footed giant. In less than 6 years, Gorbachev, under the banner of democracy and humanity, not only led the reform of the Soviet Union astray, but also ruined the socialist cause of the Soviet Union of more than 70 years. Overall, the Soviet Union's democratization, liberalization, and privatization not only failed to bring democracy and happiness to the common people, but, as Russian President Vladimir Putin said, was a geopolitical disaster and only a handful of democracy for chaebols and freedom for oligarchs. Declaring the collapse of Francis Fukuyama's theory of end of history with facts. History has not gone in the direction Western political leaders and scholars had predicted. Especially since the beginning of the new century, the deep-seated problems existing in the political system and social operation mechanism of Western capitalist countries have been further exposed. These chronic ailments are aggravated step by step due to the Western political elite's powerless, inability and incapability to correct mistakes and adjust. In recent years, American-style democracy has been continuously ineffective, disabled, and failed, and has been increasingly questioned. In 2018, the British Economist magazine website published an article entitled Deeper Changes Affecting American Democracy, pointing out that Western-style democracy has no natural immunity and is not only seriously ill, but also contagious. According to the 2021 Democracy Perception Index survey conducted by the Union Foundation for Democracy and the German polling agency Ratena Corporation among more than 50,000 people in 53 countries, 44% of the respondents believe that the United States is the biggest threat to democracy. The world has seen clearly that the Western camp led by the United States has forcibly carried out democratic transformation experiments internationally and exported political viruses in the past 30 years after the Cold War. It has not resulted in achievement of democracy, but the destruction and trampling of democracy, which is the source of today's global chaos and scourge. Democracy is historical and developmental. No country in the world can be of supremacy over all, labeling and instrumentalizing democracy, turning democracy into a tool for dominating and wanton suppression of other countries. Democracy is growing and diverse. No country in the world can monopolize it, make democracy absolutized and model it, and turn democracy into an operating software or panacea that is forcibly exported. General Secretary Xi Jinping pointed out, history is the best textbook, and history is the best teacher of mankind. The historical experience of the rise and fall of many countries in the world shows that the direction determines the fate, the system determines the rise and fall, and the road determines the success or failure. Over the past 100 years, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the Chinese people have finally embarked on the road of national prosperity and national rejuvenation, formed a mature and complete ideological system, explored a correct development path, and constructed a stable and effective system. The institutional system has formed generations of leaders with a sense of national rejuvenation mission and human feelings. The Communist Party of China is the highest political leadership force in China and is deeply trusted and supported by all Chinese people. In the course of a century-old world history, the Communist Party of China has correctly grasped the historical trend and the general trend of the world, won the historical initiative, led the Chinese people to be independent, unremittingly explore, and successfully blazed a new path that suits China's national conditions, conforms to the will of the people, and promotes national development, has made significant contributions to world peace, development, and progress, and demonstrated extraordinary political leadership on the world political stage. Governing a country and promoting a country to achieve modernization is not the only way to govern a country with the Western system model. Every country can chart its own way. It can be said that we have declared the collapse of the theory of the end of history with facts, and declared the collapse of the single-line historical view that all countries will ultimately end up with the Western institutional model. The rule of China is the first modernization practice of a non-Western and non-capitalist Eastern power in hundreds of years. It is an exploration of modernization that does not rely on colonial plunder, national enslavement, or foreign aggression. China emerged from the cocoon, surpassing the logic of capital supremacy and market supremacy, overcoming the tension between reform, development, and stability in the process of modernization, and overcoming the traps encountered by some countries in the process of modernization. The key to China's successful development lies in the independent, scientific, and effective handling of the relationship between the economy, politics, social systems, mechanisms, roads and policies, and has opened up a unique and fruitful development path in world history. The Communist Party of China is the largest and strongest political organization in the world, creating miracles one after another. The historic achievement of the rule of China is not only a magnificent poem written by the great historical cause of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, but also a magnificent work that contributes to human civilization. China's development has changed and will continue to change the world's economic and political landscape, making the international political and economic order more fair and reasonable, and making the garden of human civilization more colorful. At present, some Western countries are still clinging to the rigid and outdated Western-style democratic monism and Cold War mentality. In the eyes of politicians in these countries, there is only comparison, fight in the world, in which live with me, where you go up and down, and win or lose. On the contrary, China's development concept goes beyond the traditional logic of great power competition. In our eyes, there is no elimination match, no ring match, and no boxing match. The progress of the world depends on the track and field and relay race in which you chase after me and strive to be the first. Chinese civilization has always advocated amity, benevolence and good neighborliness, and harmony among all nations. Global politics in the minds of Chinese people should be open, inclusive, and colorful. Chinese people yearn for long-term stability of the country and a peaceful and contented life for individuals. This is also a beautiful vision shared by the world throughout the ages. The world is developing towards globalization and multipolarization. This trend is irreversible, and diverse civilizations will compete to bloom. On this basis, the people of the world should help each other, build and share together, and work together to build a beautiful home for all mankind.